Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. Today we've got a bit of a different take on what we've been doing previously. So up until now, we've had a large number of industry experts, external consultants, people, for example, within my business and my sphere of work, who are often looking into L&D from an outside perspective. But on today's stream, we actually flip that around and we have a head of L&D from GfK, Jason Flynn. He's on today to talk about the challenges that he's seen since COVID-19 has hit, and the impact that's had on training programs that were in development or in flight at the time the pandemic hit. He is accompanied by Mark Ridley from Transform Performance International, and they are developing a sales program for rollout inside GfK. Before anybody makes the obvious connection between surnames, yes, Mark Ridley is a family connection. He's my father, and Transform Performance International is where I actually started my L&D career, which to me is where it kind of gave me my foundation for how I view the world and how I operate within our industry. So you'll probably hear some common themes and thoughts from him that I may have had over the last few streams, but that's no coincidence. But hopefully today you'll get a good insight into an L&D function and how they're dealing with the challenges. So without much further ado, I shall introduce my guests here, and we have, and just pull them up onto screen. Apologies guys, it's not making the transition. There we go. You're on screen, you're live.
I'm Jason Flynn. I'm the Global Head of Learning at GfK. We're historically a market research agency. We've been going through a 2-year transformation to become the leading partner for prescriptive data analytics. So a long journey that we've been on. We have around about 9,000 people globally in over 50 countries. My role is to deliver the training to obviously have the business impact, but also for people's personal development and future career growth. And one of the projects that we've been working on is the Sales DNA project, which is something we've been doing alongside TPI, Transform Performance International. And that's where I hand over to Mark, who we've been working with.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, Tom, I hope everyone can hear me now.
They can. I'm just checking.
Okay. Why don't we just check before we just make sure
there
that
they
I
are,
go
they're
on.
there. I'm
they
giving a thumbs up to win the chat. So
wonderful. So my name is Mark Ridley, and as Jason said, I've been working with his organisation for about maybe 6-9 months now. Transform Performance International is a business that I co-founded back in 1999, and we focus on business performance improvement, primarily by looking at the way in which people approach the nature of their role through the mindset and the belief systems that they have, and how that translates into the behaviours that they display in role, and how you can then use that insight to have a direct impact on overall business performance. That's it in a nutshell. We have historically worked all around the world, primarily through sending our own facilitators into those different companies in more than 60 countries. But as Tom and Jason have alluded to, the particular challenge at the moment is how do we now adjust to the new normal? And I'm very happy to have been invited in here to hopefully get some insight from the audience, as well as maybe give a little insight of our own.
thank you very much, and thank you everybody for bearing us with the audio. As I said, these things are sent to test us, but we have a solution. So even if it is just pointing the microphone at my own computer, it works. So Jason, let's start with you, I suppose. And could you describe what the original initiative that Transform Performance have got involved in, what that looked like, obviously pre-COVID. I know that was sometime last year, but what that looked like then, so kind of set the scene for us on what you were trying to do then, and obviously it will change. Obviously, I'm assuming it changes over time, but yeah, could you elaborate?
So one of the areas that we recognise as an organisation is we were kind of lacking in the commercial culture of an organisation. You know, we were very much driven by the data that we produce. The guys that got into certain positions in the organisation got there because They were good at the statistical side of the business. They were perhaps they did have good relationships with their clients that they built up, but they were very comfortable talking about data and findings and research. And obviously, we've been through this rapid change as an organisation anyway. We have new products, new solutions coming online, and we had to find a way of rapidly changing the organisation to be more commercial in the way that we think throughout, not just the sales organisation, but the whole organisation, putting the client right at the centre of everything we do. So we identified this gap, and, as Mark said, it was back in last summer, so well before COVID, where we started thinking about how do we actually make an impact quickly within the organisation. And to do that, there's obviously a lot of analysis and auditing we needed to do. So, the first stage was, 40 depth interviews with senior stakeholders in the organisation, just to get a feel for where we currently are. And this fed into 2 development surveys that we conducted with our sales staff. The first was the salesperson secret code, which TPI have been running for quite a number of years now, where you have this benchmark of good quality data of what a good salesperson looks like, their beliefs, their behaviours. So that was the first thing. We wanted to put people through that and benchmark them against their countries, their industry, and also what good looks like generally. And the other thing, because we'd done those depth interviews and because of these stakeholder conversations, we identified the 3 different sales roles that we have within the organisation, and then looked at the 12 competencies for each of these that we think a good salesperson, sales leader, or strategic account manager would have. So that was all the stuff that we would have to do anyway. And we got to the stage just after Christmas, where we were going into this new year with a program that we were starting to develop, which was predominantly based around 2 or 1 day workshops, a series of them, but with a few other blended learning things put in there anyway. We'd already had quest challenges where people were given tasks, and then success reviews where they'd come back and talk about it. But, it was very much a fairly traditional way of delivering with a few other things tacked on.
Yeah.
So obviously we got to the end of January and the world was looking like it was changing slightly.
Yeah.
And it's still, looking back now, it seemed like it was a long period of time where we were talking about the impact of what might happen, a lockdown coming and things like that. And then it suddenly hit. And we still didn't prepare a great deal in that time in January. People came back from Christmas. We were still getting on with our traditional plan.
I think people were complacent, weren't they? I think to some degree there wasn't really we'd seen things before like SARS, and it didn't have the same effect on, especially in the UK, as this has had. I mean, this has truly been a global, crisis, and in some ways, and definitely in the modern world, unprecedented in its spread and everything like that.
Yeah, if I might say something about that, Tom, I think you're right, and I think it's a really important point to me, and it's about our mindset. And you'd expect me to say that coming from an organisation that focuses on mindset. But I've been around a little bit longer than maybe some people listening on the call, unfortunately. And I've sort of lived through recessions. I've lived through shocks and all this kind of stuff. Particularly when you're running your own company, you're more attuned to that kind of situation, perhaps. This to me feels different. And in actual fact, I think my view is that we should all ensure that we do make it different, because I think there are some lessons to come out of this one that are profound and potentially game-changing, and I think those who draw those lessons will thrive afterwards, and those who don't may struggle.
Yeah.
And the real difference is that if I go back to the previous downturns or whatever, of course we've never seen anything quite as bad as this, but then again it may be a little more short-lived. But after, for example, 9/11, I don't know if you remember so much, Jason, but we were all looking for the return to normality. So we said, yeah, it'll go virtual for a week or two or a month or two or a while, but, we'll all start flying around the world again. And we did. And then after the financial crash, it was, well, we've got to cut back on costs. We've got to be a little bit different now. We've got to be a bit more imaginative and creative. And we sort of were, but it all went back to normality. I think this is different.
I agree.
You do? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that multifaceted nature of it, because it's not just economic. It's not about just travel. We've got the issue now of, lockdown's going to be different in every country. There will be waves of this coming. I mean, we know nothing on the scientific side of it, but what we do know is we have to plan. And that's kind of what we did through February, wasn't it?
Yeah,
we started thinking, okay, what's worst case scenario? We've still invested in this program. We have, luckily for us as an organisation, we have the majority of the people still working for the organisation who are now in a position where they're at home, and it's probably not a bad opportunity for them to actually start their learning. So how do we ramp this up? How do we get it out to people quickly? And that's where we started thinking from. But we're also thinking about the user experience. GFK, we've had a global learning platform in place for everyone in the organisation for 3 years. And the actual platform's been in place for 10 years, but in certain parts of the organisation. But that doesn't always give the best user experience.
No.
I mean, we talk about blended learning. It's almost, we always throw that into every conversation we have. Oh yeah, we're going to have a blend of learning. And then how blended is it really? It's not. We may tag a few things onto workshops or to calls or something. So we wanted to make sure that if we were going to do something where people can't get the normal face-to-face interaction, it has to be something that keeps them engaged for the rest of the program.
Yeah.
There has to be really clear milestones within it, and tasks and assessments and everything else that goes around a program. It has to be mapped out for them.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of time and energy into not just, saying, well, we'll take it online, which, I've had a lot of companies trying to sell to me over the last 2 months saying, well, don't worry, we're still delivering. We're just doing it online.
Yeah.
With a live session. What's that like for a learner? A learner doesn't want to sit there and have, a full day, even if they break it just into 2, where you have to be online and listen to it. I've got 2 laptops here. I'd be on the other laptop doing my emails.
Yeah.
I'd be doing all sorts of things. So that's what we've been, we'll talk about this in more detail, but that's what we've been looking for, is how do we create this engaging learning journey that supports learners at each stage, but comes out with the same goals, maybe even achieving a better return on the investment than we would have done initially.
Just before we get into the details, I can sense that we're going that direction. You're already touching on there about how you, the kind of maybe new thought process you're going through. But I think a lot of people that will be listening to this they're in a position of, well, we need to do something, and I don't know where to start. So I suppose the question I would ask you is what was your mindset, and did you have to did you have to do anything to kind of take stock and then go, okay, this is not the end of the world, we need to do this differently? But what was that like for you? So rather than say understanding, because you're talking there about actually now physically thinking about the piece of the puzzle, but you started at shock of 6 months, 8 months of work. I'm not saying down the drain, but definitely unusable in its current form. What was that immediate emotion or reaction, and how do you kind of deal with that and then start moving forwards, that kind of transition point?
Just quickly, I'd say Jason, you have that, but you also have the pressure of the organisation because you've invested.
Yeah.
So we still have to show some return for that investment, and it can't be lost money. From my point of view, it was, I suppose it depends on your personality a little bit, but I was kind of, right, how do we make the most of this? How do we improve what we already have as an idea to now make this a little bit more online? But then it had to be something we did jointly. So, Mark and I and the rest of the TPI team and the rest of my team, we had a lot of brainstorming. We just before the lockdown, we were able to get together anyway, where we mapped out what the learning journey could look like if we added a lot of other e-learning, other support around it. So we were already kind of getting into that mindset. And I think that meeting was really important looking back now, because it gave us a bit of a framework for what we could do with all the other components of the program. But yeah, it has been that interaction. And I don't know what it's been like from your side, Mark, but I found that we kind of snapped out of that initial shock quite quickly to start thinking about how could we do this online? How could we move this to be different interactions?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I echo everything you said there. I mean, and all of the sort of prelude to that, we felt in the same way. It's interesting. What this has taught me is that you often think you have a quote unquote, and it's overused, trusted relationship with people. At the risk of sounding like a little bit like motherhood and apple pie here, I think this has never been more important. And the reason I say that is because the existence of trust and openness between the people and among the people who have to produce the outcome for the learners, in order to accelerate it to the point that we've got it, it's never been more necessary to have a foundation of trust and openness. And why I say that is because if you are a provider of intellectual property, if you're a provider of insight, you know your own secret sauce. You know what your magic is. It's a little bit like the magician. Everybody sees that you cut the person in half, and they all know there's an element of mystery to it, because it isn't really cutting the person in half. But how do they do it? You want to keep that secret. What we have done here, I think, is because of that trust and openness, we have literally opened the keys to the cupboard. I mean, I was laughing about it the other day, Tom, in one of our directors' meetings, but we have literally given away material left, right, and centre to Jason and his team, who have actually worked magic with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done that on the basis of us creating a program which is now even better for the learner, because they've taken what we've got and they've put it into a GFK way of looking at it,
yeah,
which actually is relevant. And what we have done is we've been able to say, you know what, in a true partnership way, the ideas that we've got there, the materials we've got there, have actually now got more traction than they would ever have got had we come in and sort of delivered that with our view of the world, if that makes sense.
Yep. But then from your perspective then, though, would that... because there may be people in your position as well thinking, we're a content provider. How, if we do that, we're giving away, as you said, the keys to the kingdom, our IP. So, and maybe even Jason can chime in on this as well, but then what, you're obviously still adding value, but what is that value that you're adding to that relationship beyond just being a content?
Let Jason
just doing content.
Yeah, to put you on the spot with that one, but I think as a head of learning, that is giving us a lot more value from the relationship that we had with TPI, because the one thing that I wanted to come to was, obviously any program like this is a major investment for an organisation, and my concern is a lot of the time an organisation comes in for the length of that contract and it's great, but then it all ends. I wanted something that was co-created. I said that from the start. I want this to be co-created. I want, at one stage, it was just to have some supporting collateral that we created, but now it's an integral part of it. But also I wanted a legacy from the program. I wanted there to be some content that if somebody's new in 6 months' time, and perhaps we're in between sessions, that they can still come to our platform. And what they have now, for example, is we've created this space where those 12 competencies are mapped out on there that I discussed earlier, and there are 3 or 4 courses for each of them. So if you were new and not quite on the Sales DNA program yet, there's still something there for you. So I think that is a real added value that perhaps we haven't had in the relationships with external providers previously. And hopefully there's some other benefits here for the program, because obviously we're writing into the courses now a lot more about what this actually means for GFK. People still really like spoon feeding when it comes to training. I know we try not to do that because we want people to be able to think for themselves. But if you've got really good relevant examples, if you've got good questions that GFK salespeople could be asking, then that helps their train of thought. So we are giving them a little bit more information. And also, hopefully there's some benefit for TPI here as well, because we've said we'll make the e-learning courses that we've created, we'll give the raw files over, so the authoring tool can be used, and you can use this now for TPI's purposes. So it's hopefully it's a win-win all round.
No, I second that. It absolutely is.
That's really, that last one was a really interesting point as well, because we were we've been talking on the other streams about the way to content creation, whether that's via engaging an audience and having them self-author, and whether you curate content externally or create it internally. But what you've kind of got is kind of like a hybrid model of maybe not the self-authoring, but at least the curate and create there, because you've curated content in some form into your organization, Jason. You've then molded it and then you've pushed it back out again. So it's kind of like, this hybrid model, which is, I think, that kind of creativity is important in a situation like we're in now, where we don't, where we have to be flexible and fluid with the way that we work. It's very interesting to hear that that's taking place from my side of things as a former instructional designer.
And I think, Tom, I will admit, at the very start of this, I thought, is actually going to be detrimental? And then I sort of thought, well, listen to your own inner voices here, Mark. You go around talking about, what is leadership, and what is good management, and what is great coaching, and all this kind of stuff. You think to yourself, well, actually, it is about, often being prepared to put yourself out there, take a leadership stance. Jason's internally taken a risk, and I suppose you could argue in some respects I've taken a risk. But it's not about being naive, and I think you do have to have that, mutual respect in both parties. I mean, this can only coexist when the fundamentals of the ecosystem are in place. So I'm not suggesting that anyone listening to the call who doesn't have that kind of good relationship, or it isn't open, don't be naive about it, because that won't work. But I think what I would say is that when you select learning partners, people to work with, this has made me far more discerning about the kind of company we want as a client going forward. Because this is not going to be about we'll accept anything that comes through the door, because if we are going to work in this way, we will have our own selection criteria. And I hope, and I think from the conversations I've had with Jason, it's going to be the same for him. I fully accept that TPI is not the only company GFK should or could work with. That'd be crazy. But at the very least, Jason will have a benchmark of what he expects. Is that fair, Jason?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, this is new for us as well, and it has been great that we could brainstorm the ideas the way we have as we've gone through. And I think it is about finding benefit quickly. COVID has caused this as well. That we have had to, we're looking at ways of becoming more agile in the way that we've developed our content as well, internally as well as with partners. And what we found is, we have had to move away from our traditional, going through the whole of the ADDI process, and then, taking a long time to get content out. Mm-hmm. We're now having to turn courses around in, a week and a half, 2 weeks. And we're working on multiple courses in that time as well. So it is, as you say, it's about collating good information that's already out there. We're lucky in that there is so much information out there, but the skill now is finding out what's relevant, adding that into the courses, and then putting some context around it.
Yeah.
And that's with content that's freely available, or with external partners, or even some internal stuff. We've got so much that we've developed over the years. Is it still relevant? Probably not. The world's changing so quickly. We've got 430 courses on our e-learning platform. 53% have been put up there in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But what about the rest of the stuff? Is it still relevant? So that's actually going on in the background. We've got to make sure that with all this content, that it is still needed, simple and relevant for the organisation.
With in a previous role, I did a lot of work around analysis of what exists on learning platforms and how long it's been there and when was it last updated. So to do 53% or so in the last 2 years actually is pretty good. But they say it's 6 months and your content's out of date. And I think in the world in which we live now, it feels like 24 hours. Because COVID advice that we give, like perfect example, if there are lots of organisations now curating content to say for their employees to say how they should be, washing hands and stuff is staying pretty consistent, but how they should be isolating and just providing advice. And sometimes it's around physical things, sometimes it's around, I know this is not sales related, but sometimes it's around like mental well-being and things like that. Well, in this country, and if anybody's watching internationally, we have there'll be a press conference this Sunday where potentially it's been rumoured that the lockdown measures that we're under here are going to potentially shift, but we don't know that. But let's assume that they do. All content that was created up until that point now has to change again. So I say this isn't obviously sales specific, so it won't affect you, but there are people listening to this building content like that, and I'm assuming as well that is also taking place inside your business for your employee well-being. So it is still going on. It's just the focus of this call is on the sales topic, but we have to move rapidly.
We had to put together our working in lockdown course. That we put together in I think it was 3 days. But again, it was about looking for the content that's out there. I mean, I said we're a global company, so we couldn't be too specific about lockdown details, but it was more about common sense, mental well-being. And just some things that people could join in with, online exercise classes, those sort of things. But we've been having to produce all of the normal content and the company-specific content while changing the whole of the sales DNA program as we go. So it's been a busy period.
Yeah. So then we've got a question in the chat, but I'm going to kind of change the wording on it because it's quite specific in what it's asking. So I'm going to try to kind of leave it more open. Which is, I suppose, what are the changes that you've made on the content from what it was pre-COVID to now? So you said it was very, you had a 1 or 2 day workshops with some other pieces embedded here and there. But now, how has that changed? I mean, the question asked specifically, is it using more coaching? But I'd kind of like to blow that up and say, well, what actually are you doing? What how has it shifted? We obviously don't need to go into the minor details, but just how does that look? How is the experience different to what it was before?
Okay, well, maybe I'll kick it off. Well, first thing to say is that certainly within our business, we are not strangers to the world of virtual delivery, and I would have put my hands up and say that straight away. We work with some of the people who actually own and develop some of the very sort of virtual classrooms and virtual technology that people may well be using today. So in a sense, we had a little bit of a head start. On the other hand, it is also true to say that those very providers of that technology, who are our clients, also understand that there have been until now certain limitations on the use of that technology. So I think the first thing that we did was to go back and say, well, first of all, how do we break this down into bite-sized chunks for the user in terms of the experience? And it will bring me back to the dirty question of money and budget in just a moment, because this is going to be fundamental to why we've been able to do this. So the process for us was, what is it that we want to deliver? What are the core learning messages that need to get across? And what is the maximum amount of time that we will expect people to be together in these kind of virtual situations? What can we now take out? And by the way, we have selected a certain amount of time for the program that we are running. I have to say that on occasion, I think Jason and I would prefer that the time would be even shorter, but it is what it is. But we've then decided what must be delivered in a virtual environment. Then think about the technology you've got. I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores of what we've got, I won't say, but sometimes your technology will limit the way you can deliver learning. And that's frustrating because that will vary client to client. So look very carefully then at what your technology will and will not enable you to do. So, for example, some people may have access to virtual breakout rooms, some people may not. The whiteboards and stuff like that might be easy to be interactive with, some may not.
Some people don't even have laptops; they've just got a mobile, or don't have a work
Exactly
mobile.
right. Exactly right. You cannot guarantee it. So, what we have done here, even though we in theory would have all the knowledge and the theory about how to deliver a more virtual program, Jason and I have said, let's not run the risk of the sound not coming out the other end.
What is that a dig at what happened earlier?
Let's just keep it really simple. But then let's divide out what material can be delivered in the way in which Jason and I have described up front. So get people engaged in little tasks up front, make sure that they can do some additional learning afterwards. Now, you may say, well, that's a proper blended learning approach and all that kind of stuff. Well, okay, you can go 70, 20, 10, but I'm not necessarily a big fan of all that. But the key thing here is, I think, is to be really discerning about what you deliver and how you deliver. Now, you mentioned coaching, Tom. Actually, this program that we are talking about has a large element of coaching in it, and in a sales organization, you'd expect that. But I actually think that is true. The more that you can create a coaching climate in an organization, the more likely you are to get traction with what you've delivered in the program. So Jason and I have really focused on delivering a parallel stream for leaders who are focused and will understand what the learner is getting, as well as a stream for the people who are the sort of the real target, if you like, of the audience. So that's from the TPI side. What about your side, Jason?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, echo all of that, but the flipped learning of having some content in advance of the sessions, that's going to help a lot, because we now have limited any online sessions, live sessions to 2 hours, which is still, quite a long time. But we know that we can break up the time with exercises, and we can do various interactions within that hopefully, keep people engaged for those 2 hours, because they've done the pre-learning. They know the topic area. There are also a good range of assignments in there. So, even from right at the start, it was getting somebody just to complete a one-page template about something that's been successful while they've been in COVID lockdown. So really, that's then thinking about, okay, but how did you coach your team? And start getting them in that coaching mindset for these sales leaders, because we can't coach everyone on the program. We have got these challenges. We have got the interaction with Mark and the rest of the team. We have got these success reviews that we've put in, where people get a chance to talk about what's worked and what hasn't worked. So really, the sales leaders program, we're now going to have 120, 130 sales leaders who their focus on this 18-week program is really about how to be better coaches in a sales environment. Mm-hmm. That will then feed down to the 300 other commercial staff who will get coaching as they go through. So some of the assignments we've got, they dovetail, they crisscross. Yeah. So that the leaders are coaching on topics that the commercial staff have been studying that week. So and the whole program is aimed around 2 to 3 hours study per week. So we're not overloading people, but we are. If you add all that up, that's quite a significant investment in an individual's personal development.
And that, in a sense, brings me back to the point I was making a moment ago, or started to make, about the dirty thing of money. My advice, again, when you think about content and the whole way a program is created, there will be voices out there in the big wide world saying that, we're moving to this environment, that means it's cheap. I happen not to agree with that, for all the fairly obvious reasons. But I think as learning and development professionals, we really are going to have to make the case to enable other people to understand that this does not mean cheap. This means different. We had designed a program, hadn't we, Jason? You could argue that the cost of that was eaten up. We've had to go away and redesign it. Well, we're all doing that, but and then how you then deliver and reappraise your rework your materials and so on and so forth, that all has cost. Now you could argue it's a one-off cost. Maybe it is. Time will tell. But I think the real interesting thing here is that the client has not come back to us and said, "Oh well, then it's gone virtual. Cut the price by X%." And I think that is a really forward-looking understanding of the way in which change is delivered, because I don't think all organisations will be like that.
For this to be successful, we can't just go with the number of one-day workshops, two-day workshops that you had and still deliver them. That's what we said from the start. We have to bear in mind that we've probably gone up from 25, 30 face-to-face days to 140, 150 two-hour sessions that are spread across a number of days. If we're going to be realistic, we as a company that's bringing an organisation in, we have to bear in mind that there will be considerable costs to make that successul.
Yeah. Even just from an administrative point of view.
I'm really grateful to TPI, because I know that we'd already budgeted for this, and we've gone above and beyond in a lot of ways to transform some of that content into something that would be able to deliver online. But hopefully by co-creating as well, we've been able to take some of that burden and create some of the content internally.
I think there's also another aspect that might be worth airing, and just see. I'd be interested in the reaction of the audience generally, Tom, is around the way in which we as learning professionals demonstrate that all-important return on the investment.
I was going to ask that next, but yeah, that's a great point.
Well, Jason just sparked the thought in my head there, because at the end of the day, we've gone from that fairly compressed delivery of a program, and yes, it had the blended elements and all that kind of good stuff. But now, because of the way it is, you're now delivering material in bite-sized chunks over a much longer period. We've taken a coaching program for leaders, which was delivered in about 2 to 3 days with some bits around the edge. We're now delivering that, I think, over how many weeks is it, Jason?
18 weeks.
18 weeks. So how do you equate that? Because the immediate apparent ROI is not going to be as early in the cycle as we might have thought.
The speed to competence is obviously slower, because you're not, they're not getting through everything, in 2 days.
Yeah.
But the overall value
but there's no
derived
chance
from it,
to reinforce it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't like the term ROI. I prefer the term value, because I think value is defined as something different. Return on investment was always a number, like the monetary, which you can always tie something back to. But value to me is something that doesn't necessarily have to be something that you measure as a monetary figure. So if someone gets faster at their job, yes, you can attribute a financial figure to that. But it also has knock-on benefits throughout the organisation when someone can do their job more quickly that you wouldn't necessarily normally measure using a financial metric. And that again is, maybe that comes like a circle back to the whole costings thing, is a lot of this. I mean, Jason, when we discussed like you coming onto the stream, you spoke and you actually said potentially the program that you have now is better than the one that you had originally. So, post-COVID better than the pre-COVID face-to-face or more heavy reliance on face-to-face content. If that's true, then arguably, if the cost hasn't gone up, you've actually got a better ROI or derived better value from it. So I often, when I'm talking to people, and particularly in my previous roles where I was in working with L&D functions, I would say, don't just view this as a number on a spreadsheet to say this cost this and this generated this. Particularly in sales, it's easy to make that distinction. It's more nuanced than that. I mean, is that something you agree with, or?
Yeah, I completely agree with it. I mean, how can you put a value on confidence? It's really, you can't do it. But if you could see that, when we obviously have our internal measures, and we will be looking at the sales figures. We have to. It's big investment in our salespeople.
Of course.
But what we also will want to do is, I talked about in Q4 last year, we did the surveys, the development prioritizer. Let's rerun that. Let's see if there's been a change in the way people believe in their role as salespeople, the kind of behaviours that they're exhibiting. Let's get some anecdotal evidence in there as well. I mean, it all has to be backed up. But, if people are more comfortable in their role, if people aren't leaving, I mean, again, that's a tricky one to look at in a period where you've got lockdown, because people won't be swapping jobs. But, in a normal environment, are people happier with the organisation? What's our linking it back to our employee engagement studies and all the other things that we do as an organisation already, just to see the levels of happiness and confidence within their role. I think that's important, equally as important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, I'm with you, Tom. I mean, as you will know, I've been banging on for years about ROI is not the only measure. But the other thing for me is, especially when you look at a program like this, and again, very often in an L&D world, we're forced to react to a particular burning platform, a particular issue, that arises. I mean, obviously, this is COVID-19 is a classic example. But at the end of the day, as Jason described earlier on, yes, this is about selling more at GfK. It's also about selling differently. It's also about aligning an organisation like GfK to its future market, its place in that market, and how it does business, its target operating model, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, we knew as an organisation that, we were a small part of that picture, and by coming in and helping to run some programs and personal development programs, we could have an impact on that. But actually what this has afforded us now, because of the elapsed time of the program now, we actually have a better opportunity to engage in that mindset shift that is actually core to how we operate anyway.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly able now over a period of time to repeat those new belief systems leading to new behaviours and giving different outcomes.
Keep banging
in a
that
way
drum.
that actually in a 2-day program or a 1-day session or something like that, you actually don't get as many bites of that cherry. So I think if L&D professionals see themselves as change agents, I think a properly organised, more virtual world is actually an opportunity for us all.
Agree. I mean, one thing that you mentioned there as well, and it comes back to a point that was brought up earlier about the perception of training. This program is going to have to go a long way to change that perception of training being only effective if it's in a classroom. Our company is a German organisation that comes from academia. It was founded in the universities. Even until recently, people think that something's been taken away from them when face-to-face is taken away.
Yeah.
So a program like this, where you can display the benefits over a period of time, and actually, we'll be monitoring all of the participants to make sure that they're happy with the journey that they're on. I think that at the end of it, they'll come out a little bit more enlightened about the opportunities that online training and the way it can be delivered and using a range of methodologies can actually bring to the individual.
I think that's really interesting.
And I think there's a number of things in there, Tom, that sort of come out of this. And again, you, in a sense, the sort of a couple of false starts to this very live stream were a classic example.
Stop it.
And I think that is about relax into the technology, relax into what's going on. It isn't going to be smooth. There are going to be bumps in the road.
Yeah.
It's a bit like being on stage. People will dry. They will forget their lines, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's a whole range of stuff that I think that as people who put learning and development together, we can actually take on board lessons from this whole COVID experience to actually create far richer experiences for people going forward. I really believe that.
And I think on that point as well about it doesn't have to be polished or perfect. Maybe I've seen that a lot where I think people have this expectation because digital learning or learning that's let's just say let's take that way, distance learning, where So anything created without the necessarily that face-to-face in a classroom environment contact. That because of the fact that all that material is created in advance, there's an expectation that it is polished to the point where it feels super slick and perfect. Where the reality is that, you know, I think there's such a thing as being too polished, which is actually, and anybody listening to this, I prefer the live stream format to say a quote unquote webinar, because webinars have become synonymous with slide decks and less about us having what we've had here, which is a back and forth about a topic area, and less audience participation potentially. Even not because that's intended, just because that's the way those platforms have gone, and that's what you associate with a webinar. Everyone's muted. You might have a chat function. So for me, it doesn't have to be polished. What it needs to be, it needs to deliver something engaging and something. It obviously still needs to deliver against what you originally intended, but if it engages people and it's not perfect, then that's better than something you've polished to the nth degree and actually still doesn't deliver or disengages people.
Yeah, exactly. There are two big things from that I would take away. I mean, the first is, I talked earlier about being agile in the way that we develop stuff. Well, if you remember when we used to have like studio produced video, that it would take us ages to get it right, the script. And then normally it would be delivered by people that either weren't in your business, or if they were in your business, they seemed really unnatural in front of the camera. And so everything seemed a little bit false. So how do you expect your learners to engage with it if there's this Hollywood style here that doesn't pay any reality to what life's like in an office in Nuremberg or Delhi or wherever? So, one thing that we did was try and get past that a little bit. It was with our rapid learning and becoming more agile. We just said to some of our key stakeholders and subject matter experts, just film yourself on your iPhone or whatever phone you've got. Send us the file. We'll do a little bit of editing to it. We won't do much, and we just pop that in. So now we have these, 30-second, 40-second pitch videos within our product training. That's actually somebody that goes out and sells to a customer, and you see them there talking as they would. Yeah. So that's worked quite well. And the second thing is communication. Keeps coming out of all of the things we've been discussing here. And this is we still haven't got it right. I don't know of any learning company or any learning development team within an organisation that gets it right. There's still a real misconception. So that's something that we're working on a lot, is communication.
Yeah.
I actually have somebody in my team that comes from a marketing background, so we're using that now because it's about talking about all of the opportunities that are out there. It's about making the training that we have relevant to the individual, and it's harder to do that if you've got slick videos and things like that. There's a time and a place.
No, thank you for dropping that in there, because it's one thing that when I spoke to you stood out for me, because I've been saying it for a long time, and I've said it on previous streams in the last few weeks about how we should be using resource from outside, particularly comm strategies, and marketing have a great skill set that is perfectly lends itself to engaging with an audience, which is, as you said, typically not one of L&D's strengths. Look, I'm conscious of time, and obviously people have got busy lives and things to do, and obviously thank you to both of you for jumping on. Is there anything? Well, maybe quick questions in the chat if there are any, but if there are any final comments from either of you, maybe, I don't know, words of encouragement for the audience, or like your kind of like parting thought that would help them, or just something to hold true whilst you embark on trying to shift the content to maybe digital, or just deal with stuff in this new world of work we find ourselves in with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it's just give it a try. It's simple as that.
Yep.
It's not going to be perfect. It will evolve. And I think this gives us actually an opportunity to do that, try some new techniques. Like within my team, we're doing a lot more just quick video. Or we're not going for the full package all the time. So you add those component parts together, you end up with something that is really, really useful. So it's about then how we can get that out to our people. But give it a try would be my main takeaway.
I absolutely agree. I think it's don't be afraid to get it wrong. again in L&D, sometimes we have a mindset which is like, when this goes out, it has to be perfect and we're going to be judged by it and all that kind of stuff. What this lesson has taught me is that people are prepared to, relax, whatever it might be. I got to be honest, a few months ago, I might never have shown up to a webinar, live stream, whatever you want to call it, in a short sleeve shirt because I had a professional image to maintain. I think that has gone. I think the world has changed. Everybody's mindset has changed. Make yourself vulnerable. Give it a go. And if you've got a trusted relationship in the team that you've got, people will see that as a learning experience and not a reason to criticize.
And just adding to that point about being vulnerable, it's not just being vulnerable, it just makes you accessible rather than being shirt and tie and a suit on the end of a like a video or a webinar. Like no one's like that. We always talk about rapport building and mirroring someone or just just feeling more natural to them the way they are. People are at home now sat in dressing gowns. Nobody say don't do it in a dressing gown, but the people are casual at home. That's just what it is. So
I had a meeting with a potential client for the first time about 3 days ago. And obviously we'd never met. We had to meet over the internet, and within 5 minutes of that call taking place, I'd already met his kids.
Yeah.
And we were laughing about how the world has changed. He'd have been trying to impress me in his glass tower somewhere in London.
Yeah.
And as it was, he ended up eating a tin of Heinz tomato soup and having his kids on his knee while we had the meeting. And that's how learning should be now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's how life is. So
yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. That was super informative from my perspective, so I can only assume the same is true of the audience. Thank you. If anybody wants to connect with either of these two individuals, they are able to do so on LinkedIn. If you search for them, their names are in the description of the video. In fact, I tagged them in my LinkedIn post. You should be able to find them. I'm assuming they won't mind anybody asking any questions, but
no, please do.
But
great to share my days.
But thank you both. As a final wrap up from me, this is the last stream of this kind of series. Thank you for the feedback there, Wayne. Just for you two that can't see, Mark and Jason, Wayne says, love that, thank you. What we have is a webinar next Thursday instead of it being a live stream, and there's no stream on Tuesday. So next Thursday, I'm on a webinar with Laura Overton, who, as you know, has been on multiple streams in this series. We're kind of pulling all this together in a cohesive, hour of kind of thought, and I don't know. She's coming in with loads of information that she's gathered from various questions and sessions that she's been doing throughout this COVID crisis. So not just what we've been discussing on stream, other things as well. So please join that. Sign up. Details are in the comments, the description below. And other than that, I will see everybody next time we stream, and hopefully on the webinar next week. But thank you, Jason. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
And thank you for bearing with the technical issues.
Have a great day.
Bye,
yeah.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Signing off.